Okay, so with no further ado, I would like to present today Olivier and Jonathan. I think most of you know Olivier, who is account manager at Google Belgium, manages the biggest accounts of the country. He spends also most of his time in data, so he will share interesting insights with you. And Jonathan is coming from the UK, heads a part of the retail 100 billion euro business, influenced by internet in the UK. So just to give you an idea, Belgium is just getting to 1 billion. So if you compare the two guys, one of them is 100 times heavier than the other, even if it doesn't look like that. Most of all, Jonathan comes from Australia, and he told me yesterday that he was a rodeo rider in Australia, so that you also see the backside.
Much smaller.
Yeah. I leave you the word, guys.
Thank you, Julien. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today with Jonathan, we'll be talking about measure the gap. Measure the gap means that we would like to do a comparative study where we would actually assess the position of UK compared to Belgium.
Yes, thank you for having me here. You can see a photo of me on my summer holidays last year. And we're not here to say one market is better or worse than the other, but just to look at the differences. In the United Kingdom, the consumer has really embraced the internet, and we've had to make up a lot of things as we go because there's no real market to look to for experience or to learn from. We think that's an advantage to you here in Belgium, where perhaps you can look at some mistakes of others and what others have done well and make some decisions a little more efficiently, perhaps.
And you might think that actually those two markets are not really comparable, but if you look, for example, at GDP per capita, I mean, Belgium and the UK has almost the same level at $31,000 per capita. If you think now in terms of history and look at the Industrial Revolution, for example, back to the 19th century, Belgium was the second leading country in terms of industrial penetration, just behind the UK. We were also at that time like a superpower economically. So the first thing we will see today is like how to quantify the gap. So I hope it is not a surprise for you that Belgium is lagging behind the UK, but we will try to put this on a scale in order to do a benchmark.
Absolutely. Just like the Industrial Revolution comparison, we're in a digital revolution now, just at the very beginning of it. So it'd be very interesting to see where it might head to.
Afterwards, once we have done this benchmark, we'll try to understand the reasons why in order to pull out some leverage of action that can be done. And then, finally, Jonathan will share with us some insights and some actually advice that we can learn from the UK market. So let's jump into the presentation. Let's go. So this first slide is showing you here some Eurostat figures. And you can see here the e-commerce penetration in terms of individuals that made a purchase the past 12 months. And actually, it is linked to Julien's question, but you can see here that Belgium is at 38% for 2010, just lagging a bit behind the EU average.
Yes, and you can see in the UK, nearly 70% of the population have purchased something online. Most people are very comfortable now. It's not just the early adopters who may have been younger or more adventurous that were on 3 or 4 years ago. Many of the more traditional part of the population is now buying from the trusted brands that they've used to and bought to traditionally offline are now buying from them online as well.
And tell me, Jonathan, when was the moment in the UK where you really had this momentum of e-commerce growth?
2005, 2006, I think a lot of traditional businesses realized the internet was not a fad, was not a craze, it was here to stay. Amazon had launched a UK-based website, and that's when the population really got going online.
Well, tell us, what's the most crazy thing you bought online?
Well, I must admit, I saw a mouse in my flat last year, so I didn't want one that was going to chop its head off and leave guts all over the place. My wife would not have liked this, so I went online, did a search, I found a fantastic site. All they sold was mouse traps, and they had a nice one that would trap the mouse but not kill it and let me release it, hopefully run it to someone else's house.
Great story, yeah? Let's look at another slide in order to understand a bit better what's going on in the market. And this is what we call the Belgian Paradox. Those are Google internal data that we have compiled, and we are looking on the first chart on the top, actually the numbers of search that are being done by capita. And you can see that for 10 searches that are being done in the UK market, there are actually 8 searches that are being done in the Belgian market. That's quite good, actually. That can be also explained, maybe like the small gap can be explained by internet penetration, for example. But now, when we look at conversions, and what is a conversion? A conversion, it is an action that is being done on a website. Often it is transaction, but it can also be like a sign up or filling up a form, you know. And we see that for 10 conversions that are being done in the UK, there are actually only 3 conversions that are being done in Belgium. And that is what we call the Belgian Paradox.
Yes, it's very interesting, and we'll look at this further as we go forward. But the UK consumer loves to search. They love to find out information. You can see that they lead the absolute volume per capita there of searches. But that's the first stage of coming online. Once you build familiarity and you build confidence, you then start to be more comfortable to buy and go forward. So, Olivier, it's interesting that difference is still quite large, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and we'll try to find an explanation to that furthermore into this presentation. Let's come back to the Eurostat data we were presenting a bit earlier. And here you have the evolution perspective. So you can see here the evolution in terms of e-commerce penetration between Belgium, UK, and other peer countries. And if you look at the level in 2010 for Belgium, so around 38%, you can draw the line and bring that to the level that UK had 5 years ago, back in 2005. So when we say measuring the gap, we assess here that the gap we have with the UK is up to 5 years. 5 years seems really like enormous, it's huge. How would you explain that? 5 years, what is that?
It's hard to gauge, isn't it, in the digital world? What does that really mean? What does that relate to? Maybe we can draw an analogy to phones. Who here has an iPhone? Or an Android phone, hopefully. Fantastic, most of you. Who can remember using something like the Nokia? I can remember having one like that 4 or 5 years ago. And there was nothing wrong with that. It worked very well. But I bet very few of you here would be willing to trade back now. I'd also like to perhaps guess that you use the iPhone or your Android phone a lot more than you use that Nokia. So it is a case of if you build it, they will come. With all this extra availability, I think, and features, this is what can really enhance and get people using online more here. So we have seen the user perspective in terms of e-commerce. But now we want here to show you the revenue perspective. And here on this graphic, for Belgium, we have pulled out the Ogon figures that are being released every year, you know. And you can see here that the average revenue in terms of e-commerce that is being done per capita in Belgium is close to 90 euros in 2010. Yes, you can see the British figures are from the IMRG group that measures e-commerce from retail and from travel. And you can see that nearly, over 1,000 euros per person last year was spent online, over 60 billion for the whole country. You can still see, even at that big level, there's still very healthy growth rates in the United Kingdom of over 10%, but the trend is that the growth is easing, whereas the Belgian figures show that growth is actually increasing, the growth rate itself, not the absolute amount. So maybe you are coming to your real sort of explosion point here. And
that's the good news. I mean, although obviously here we are below the UK, it seems that the growth rate is higher. So at Google Belgium, I mean, we really thought about that, and we believe that we can catch up with the UK. We really believe that we can grow and reach this level also. And if we would be doing the same level of e-commerce revenue per capita, our forecast would be up to 10 billion euro that can be generated thanks to e-commerce in Belgium. We are talking here about yearly figures. That's a huge amount. So now we have seen that there is this huge potential hanging there. Let's try to understand a bit what is the leverage. And we have made actually some analysis in Google Belgium. Since many years, we are trying to understand the reasons of why Belgium is lagging behind.
Yes, we've established some benchmarks, and I think that's useful because it can help you see where the gaps are greatest and where they are smallest, and focus your attention in that respect. So what is it, do you think? We've seen that at least search activity or usage of online is quite equivalent between the countries, but purchasing is a lot different. Is it that, Olivier, that in Belgium there's a sort of security fears online of payments and so on? Is that what the difference is?
Security can be a reason, but it is not the main reason here.
What about, is it credit cards and this sort of thing? Obviously you need some sort of card to pay online. I know the Europeans tend to prefer to use cash, or this is what I understand.
You are a European, UK also. Credit cards can be a reason, but it's not the main reason either.
What perhaps is the main reason?
Actually, when we look at the data, we see that the main reason here, it's because it's consumer habits. Consumers don't have the need actually to purchase online. The shelves are empty, and this is what you can see here on the picture. It is somehow because there is no supply online that really answers the consumer's needs, that somehow it's the chicken and egg theory, you know, like because the egg is not there, the chicken is not there, you know. So somehow e-commerce here is not moving forwards. Let me show you something else. This is showing you, so this is Google compiled data. It's a share of advertisement investments happening in different sectors. And you can see here the Belgium flag, the Belgium share, versus foreign investment that are actually coming on our markets. And out of those sectors, it is very surprising, and this is really like very particular to the Belgian market. This doesn't happen in other markets, that the majority of those sectors are dominated by foreign investments.
Yes, and which countries in particular are sort of seizing this vacant space in Belgium?
So from the data we have compiled, 34% of investments are coming from the Netherlands, 30% from France, and around 20% from the UK.
Really? So it's all some of your closest neighbours. What do you think is
yeah, because you know Belgium is just one click away. There is no real language barrier happening here, you know. For a website that is .fr or .nl, in a few clicks they can directly target the Belgian market and think that they can assess their presence in Wallonia or in Flanders. Do you know the Rue Neuve, Jonathan?
I have learnt of it here since my first time to Brussels, but I hear it's a very famous shopping street. Is this right?
It is indeed a very famous. There is also Avenue Louise, very famous. But the Rue Neuve is actually one of the most expensive shopping streets you can find in Belgium. And you have there high street retailers that are ready to pay a huge amount of rent just to be present at the Rue Neuve. So the other day I was walking around, you know, and Rue Neuve, and I was like playing this little game with myself and trying to see, okay, out of the shops that are present here on Rue Neuve, how many of them have a fully functional e-commerce website localized in Belgium? By that I mean speaking the correct language, proposing interesting shipping costs, you know, those kinds of things. And actually, the figures are quite astonishing.
Yes, we certainly were surprised to see this small rate. In the UK, as I mentioned, e-commerce represents 10% of all retail sales, around 7% of GDP, according to a recent report we did with the Boston Consulting Group. And we certainly don't propose that all goods will eventually be bought online. We don't think that will be the end result. But in some categories like DVDs and music, over 50% is already sold online. For consumer electronics, it's above 20% is sold online. So with such a large chunk of the whole market coming through online, traditional retailers, high street retailers have not been able to ignore e-commerce anymore. And so they have created web stores. You can see for furniture and home and garden and so on, it makes sense. It's intuitive that people want to go and see the sofa, see the bed before they buy it. So it's not so much a need. But for certain categories, it's essential now to have a fully operational web store.
Indeed, Jonathan. And maybe you can share with us some insights, or maybe you can give us some advice of how we can build the market, the Belgian market together, and maybe we can look at the UK and see a bit what could be the learnings that we can get from the UK. So you wanted to speak about money supermarkets.
Yes, there were three themes here we thought we'd touch upon quickly, and you could learn more about these businesses yourselves. But the first one is a financial aggregator or a price comparison. The theme here is keeping up with your consumer. There's clearly been a big shift. Most people will agree that a lot of media consumption takes place online now. A lot of the days, hours are spent online. People love to look for bargains, and it's very easy online. But to go and compare each supplier can be hard. So this business thought, let's compile all the feeds. Let's make it possible to do it in one place. So they started with one product, home mortgages, home loans. Very quickly they rolled out into insurance, into travel, into mobile phones and broadband. You can now get prices from over 100 suppliers for 47 different product categories. So they've done all this in 10 years and grown revenues to over 150 million euros. So that's one example of following your consumer and see where they're going and give them something there.
So what's your main learning here?
Absolutely. Don't stop at one product. They didn't stop with mortgages. They saw that worked, but they didn't think we'll just become the mortgage person. Let's see what else we can give to the consumer and offer them some value.
The second case is about John Lewis.
Yes, this is a traditional retailer, and I thought it'd be interesting to look at the challenges and how they're integrating the web store into their traditional business. If you've been to the UK, you've probably seen one of their department stores. They are now getting 15% of their revenue from their web store. It was about £500 million, nearly 600 million euros last year. What's interesting from this piece of revenue is that 17% of that is what we call click and collect. This is where someone comes to the website, finds a product they like, says, I would like to reserve this in a store that they live nearby or near their work perhaps. They get a reference number, they go to the store, the product is waiting for them at the cash register, at the special collection point. So it's very good for the busy shoppers who tend to be often more affluent workers. It's something that is of value to them. But what's also interesting, 1 in 3 of these people who come to collect a good make an impulse purchase when they're there. And so the basket value is generally greater as well.
So how do they measure, I would say, this impulse shopper?
It's a good question. Obviously, when you go to the cash register, you have your receipt for the good you've collected, but then generally the person has 1 or 2 other items they've collected on the way through, and the person at the cash register makes the comment and adds the data.
So can you summarize the learning here?
Well, it's about letting the customer, offering them these different channels and letting them cross between the two. Don't say you must start and finish online, the purchase, or start and finish in the store, or start and finish on the phone at the call center. Your customers view your brand as one unit, whether it's the website, whether it's the store, whether it's your call center, and they don't care about the challenges of having to match up profit and loss between the two. So you must allow them to move between channels. And if you do, you'll get a lot more loyalty, and they'll tend to spend more with you as well.
And finally, you had ASOS also.
That's right. It stands for As Seen on Screen, and it started off as someone who looked at the data they could get from online. They saw that people were searching for certain items that had been on the television or on the movie recently. So perhaps Jennifer Aniston had wore a unique dress the night before on Friends, something like this. People were searching the next day, Jennifer Aniston dress. So he started to stock these products, bid on these type of searches, saw that he was meeting some demand that had been created here. So very quickly he invested in better product lines in his website. ASOS is now growing at about 44%, I think it was last year, over 100% with its international sales. They have a £1 billion revenue goal for 2015. So in only 3 years away, there'll be a £1 billion business. They've invested in a £20 million distribution centre. They can ship to Europe in 5 days, and they'll only charge €6 to do this. So they can ship to your customers in 5 days for €6. They have invested in a German language website, a French language website also. So the point here is that when something gets going and you see there's some demand there, you must double down, as we say. You must make the big bet quickly, because it can really explode and the demand can take off.
Thank you for all those insights, Jonathan. And a bit to conclude this presentation, we have seen together, we have measured the gap, and we have seen that obviously Belgium is lagging behind. It is even seriously lagging behind, like 5 years, So that's really a lot. But at the same time, in a positive way, it means also that this could represent a huge amount of potential. We at Google, we believe that this could represent up to 10 billion revenue potential for e-commerce actors here in Belgium. We also think that it is time to move, and that if the market doesn't move fast enough, it is somebody else that will take advantage of it. So, like our two champions here would say, you know, like the ball is in your court. Thank you.
Thank you very much.